Well, good morning and welcome to our dining room in Bromley Common. And today we're going to be looking at obstacles as we go through our journeys in Lent. So if you wanted to read the story, we're looking at Joshua chapter 2 and Joshua chapter 5:13 to 6:25. Now, we all have an idea that attaining our goals should be straightforward. Work hard, strive, and we will get there. Throughout lockdown, we've subscribed to the view that we need to stay home and save lives, save the NHS. It's become a mantra, hasn't it? And if we obey it, then we should at last be allowed to come out of lockdown. But sometimes our hopes and dreams are met with obstacles that are not easily overcome. And who would have thought a year ago that we would have faced a whole year of being in lockdown? Now, Joshua and the people of Israel had crossed the Jordan River. God had opened a way where there appeared to be no way. The waters were wide in full spate, yet God made a way through the waters. When the priests carried the ark into the water, as Richard reminded us yesterday, the waters parted. They had to step out in faith. But then there were other obstacles. The city of Jericho was one. Now, the inhabitants of the city were not welcoming. Except for Rahab, they did not like strangers. Rahab welcomed strangers. Unless the people passed through Jericho, they were not going to be able to reach the promised land. Now, we know the story about how Jericho fell from that song that we used to sing in school. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. And it seems a crazy idea to march around a city 7 times, banging drums and blowing trumpets. For Rahab, it might have seemed totally crazy to welcome the spies, to hide them on her roof, and then to tie a scarlet thread from her window onto the outside wall. It might have seemed a crazy idea to turn her back on her cultural deities and acknowledge God as being the ruler over all. Recently, I read of a young man with a dream to be an architect. His place at university was dependent on him getting decent grades, but due to COVID, an algorithm was used last year to determine young people's grades. Despite being predicted to be a straight A star, he was given ungraded. He didn't fit the normal profile for the degree that he wanted to go to. This obstacle did not deter him. He appealed. He retook his exams. He appealed again when the results were still disappointing, to say the least. Finally, it was acknowledged that the government's algorithms that were used last year for young people was flawed, giving bias to young people in private schools and affluent areas. He wrote letters, and finally he got into university to follow his dream. We're putting the link to the article in the newspaper for you to read for yourself. The walls of Jericho did come tumbling down, but the Israelites had to obey God. Nothing was to be kept as the spoils of war. Only Rahab and her family were to be spared. However, Achan flouted the rules. He kept treasure for himself And when they faced the next obstacle, the Israelites were soundly defeated. Similarly, we have been warned that flouting the lockdown rules, meeting up with others too soon, not having the vaccine when offered, will ultimately extend our time in lockdown. Overcoming obstacles then needs courage. Courage and a willingness to do things differently and to be obedient to God. What obstacles are we facing? What roadmap is God showing us? And are we willing to do things differently? As an aside, we might be tempted to rush back into our church buildings to do things as we've always done. But Paul reminds us that our governments are placed there by God. We should obey the laws of the land. We should look out for one another. If we rush back, maybe we will put others in jeopardy. We are to set a good example to the weakest, even if we are strong. Rahab chose hospitality over fear, giving shelter to strangers, trusting God for her future. For Rahab, there was no going back to what she was used to. And yet, isn't it amazing? In the great, list of saints and heroes of faith in Hebrews, Rahab is only the second woman mentioned. She faced obstacles of living in a city that was inhospitable, that refused hospitality to the stranger. A city that refused to acknowledge God. A city where she was labeled a prostitute. She faced her obstacles with faith that God would lead her to a new future. It was a new day. And that will be the same for us. So let us face our obstacles with perseverance, with courage, and with faith that God will open a way for us. Every blessing, and we will see you tomorrow as we continue on our journey. Bye-bye. There we go.